If you could start by talking about who are the Gilbert Goons?
Like, as people or like as a whole?
Well, as a whole and then as people.
Well, like, as a whole, they're just like a bunch of rich kids just wanting to be bad kids, I guess, like go against their parents, like hurt people, I guess.
Did you guys talk about hurting people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, like, they would like talk about how, we would talk about how if someone like looked at us wrong, we'd like just beat the shit out of them, stuff like that.
And did you do that?
I personally didn't, but they did.
How many are there?
A good 40, 50.
40 or 50 kids?
Yeah, but like, some of them aren't really like goons per se, but they are, if that makes sense. The first time seeing them beat someone up, I mean, it didn't really affect me, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't know. I used to say, I think violence is super normalized nowadays.
Where did it happen? What was involved?
Pretty sure it was at the skate park, and the first time I saw them beating up a kid was at the skate park, and I think the kid said something, and one of them got mad, and then they all just started fighting.
You call it fighting. Is it really a fight?
More like them just jumping this kid, like beating him up. Like, he didn't really stand a chance. He was like this little short kid.
Does anybody stand a chance against these guys?
I mean, if you have a gun or a weapon, you definitely stand a chance against them, but not with your bare hands, really. Unless it's like 3 of them. If it's 3 of them, they don't know how to fight, so that's why they jump you in numbers. So if it was like 1-on-1 or like 3-on-1, you definitely probably could get out of that. At one point, the beatings were every night, but before that fact, like before it got that bad, it was more of a like 2 to 4 times a weekend, yeah.
That's a lot of beating kids.
Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know how they didn't get tired of beating kids up. Like, I'd get tired at some point. It's like, why am I doing this? They'd be like coked out of their mind. They'd be off Xanax, Percocet, anything they could get their hands on, really. But not all of them. This was like the druggy group of them, and then the majority of them really just smoked weed and like did the occasional cocaine.
Were they angry?
They were definitely very angry people. Like, you had to watch what you said around them, for sure.
Even if you were part of it?
Like, even if you were a part of them, like, they didn't care who they were beating up, really. Like, it could be their best friend. Their best friend said something they didn't like, they get beat up. But when we would go out, like, we really didn't care about who we would beat up. Well, I say we, but they would. Like, they wouldn't really care. It's just, they would just beat up anyone who looked at them wrong, talked to them wrong, made them mad.
Adults?
If you classify 18-year-olds as adults, then yes, adults. But there was never a fight with like anyone over like the age of 20.
Did people try to stop you in these parking lot beatings? Did adults, non-teenagers get involved?
No, I mean, you can't really stop that. It's a group of 40, 50 kids, like, surrounding this fight. Like, there's not much you could really do to stop a fight when it's that large of a scale. You kind of just have to let it go. A good chunk of these fights, they had brass knuckles. There was other weapons involved. They had guns, knives, etc. Whole 9 yards.
Were you guys afraid of being caught by the police?
Most definitely not. We saw the police. The police saw us. I mean, the police knew what was going on.
There's no uncertainty that the police knew what was going on?
No, they definitely knew what was going on. The police knew for sure.
So you really believe that the Gilbert police knew what was happening?
I know for a fact that they did. Like, they watched us. I know for a fact they knew what we were doing because they would watch it happen and still would do nothing about it.
Explain to me how they watched. What did they give me a?
We'd be at In-N-Out, and they would drive by, and we'd have bottles of liquor on our hand. We'd be beating up kids, doing drugs in the parking lot, and they just looked at us and like would walk by. Like, I remember one night this kid named ran away with his girlfriend, and they came up to us all drunk after they just beat the crap out of a kid, you know, and they just literally were like, "Oh, we're not bothering you guys. We just want to know if you have seen this kid." And we were all like, "No," and then they just drove off.
Even though you were obviously drunk and
Obviously drunk, like we had bottles in our hand, everything. Like they should have at least like been like, that's public intoxication, but they didn't do anything about it.
Did you guys ever laugh about the police?
We didn't laugh about the police per se, but we definitely mocked them.
How so?
Like, we knew that whatever we did, we wouldn't get in trouble for.
So how did you mock them? How, just amongst yourselves?
Like, yeah, definitely amongst ourselves. We're like, if we saw like Gilbert PD, we'd be like, Gilbert PD doesn't do shit, like they're bitches, like shit like that.
Was there one police officer, one or two police officers that you guys identified that you knew would never do anything to you?
I don't know his name, but there was this police officer that would sit at In-N-Out, and we knew for a fact, like, he wouldn't do shit. Like, whatever we did, he would just turn his head and not look at it. Like, he would just sit there, like, we'd beat kids up, and he would just sit in the corner of the parking lot with a clear view of what we're doing, and just wouldn't approach us, nothing. He'd just sit there.
How do you guys come together?
A party, we came together from, like, parties, school, friends, really any way you can meet anyone. That's how we became friends and we got together, and then we'd all meet up at like In-N-Out and then go party.
What's In-N-Out? That you mean the burger joint?
Yeah, the burger place, In-N-Out, yeah, over by Santa Mall.
Aha. There were a lot of beatings there?
Yeah, there was a lot of beatings at In-N-Out, definitely. A lot more at In-N-Out than anywhere else, probably. If I was friends with them, I'd sell them weed, smoke weed with them, party with them. But I never took part in the actions that they would go through, like fighting people and stuff like that.
So what was the attraction? You said you sold them drugs. What was the attraction to be part of this group of kids, 40 to 50 kids?
I feel like a lot of it was fear, and they also had drugs, and that's a big part of it, and people want drugs, and they'd hand them out to people.
Did you feel like you mentioned that they were rich, a lot of rich kids. Did you feel like that was part of your world?
I don't feel like them being rich was definitely not part of my world, but it was definitely a big part of their world for sure.
I mean, if there were 40 or 50 kids, were different groups doing different beatings?
There different groups didn't do different beatings, but there definitely were different groups. There were like the hillbillies, then you had like the rich white kids, and then you had like, I guess like the druggies, I'd say.
And which group did you gravitate toward?
Kind of the druggies and the rich white kids.
Now, the beatings were recorded, right?
Yes, the beatings were recorded, some of them.
And what was the point?
I guess the point of recording it is just, I don't know, people find that entertaining. So, and to show people like what happened, I guess.
Did you find it, I mean, was it entertaining to you?
I'm not gonna lie, a little bit, yeah.
And so you would pass these around and share them?
I wouldn't share them, no, I'd just watch them.
But somebody shared them?
Yeah, yes, sir.
And how bad were the beatings? How bad did it get?
The beatings got pretty bad, or else we wouldn't be in the position we are now where Preston's dead, but most of the beatings would lead to people with broken bones, broken noses, broken jaws.
Do you, you mentioned Preston more. Did you see that coming? Did you see that being not him particularly, but was that something that was on your mind that could happen sooner or later?
Definitely. Like, I mean, you build that ego over time, and I'm not gonna get caught, like I can do all this damage, and you just wanna keep pushing it, seeing how far you can get till you get caught.
So you said you stopped participating because of these beatings. Were you worried that somebody was gonna get seriously hurt?
Yeah, I was definitely worried that people would get seriously hurt, but people already were getting seriously hurt. Like, they were hospitalizing kids for sure.
You know who's been arrested, of course, in the Preston Ward case.
Yes, sir.
Were they involved in the beatings?
Yes, sir. The people who were arrested were big parts of these beatings, I'd say, but the whole entire group as a whole were like definitely main perpetrators. I just can't recall names of the whole group.
So what were you doing? Where were you at with the goons Well, when you heard about what happened on October 28th?
I wasn't in communication with the goons at all. They were, I think, actively trying to jump me at that time.
So you felt like you had a target on your back?
Definitely did have a target on my back.
Because?
Because I got in a fight with and they didn't like that.
So that was the straw?
Yeah, that was definitely like the straw where that stopped them from being cool with me.
Do you know where you were when you heard that a kid had been beat up at a Halloween party?
Yes, I was at home when I found out about Preston's death.
Was there any doubt in your mind about who did it?
No, I knew they definitely did that. They definitely beat Preston to death. I knew that right as I found out.
How did you know that?
Because just I knew that because of just the description of what happened that night matched what they do.
And that description, you weren't hearing from them on social or anything?
No, I wasn't hearing from them at all on any social media. The only things I would hear from them on social media was like that they were gonna jump me. They'd send me like my address and I'd be like, okay, come jump me then.
How long did it take you to find out who was involved?
Like, it took me about 2 hours to figure out who was involved.
And how did you do that?
I just asked a few friends. They told me.
Were they there at the party?
No, those friends weren't at the party, but they knew people who were goons that were bragging about it.
And so they were bragging.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, they were bragging.
Would you consider the goons your surrogate family? Was it a big deal to you?
No, being like friends with the goons definitely was not a big deal to me. It was just more of a friendship. Like, I was just seeking friends. Didn't want to be lonely in a sense.
Did you get close to any of them?
Definitely not close, but like no one was really close like that in the goons. Like, everyone was very like no feelings, no, just drugs, alcohol, partying. That was really it.
You mentioned, was he involved in beatings?
He definitely like was, but like none that I can like remember, if that makes sense. Like, I can't pinpoint a fight he was in, but he definitely was. Like, I remember him coming to school with his knuckles all busted. Like, he was definitely beating kids with them. But I know the night the night Preston died, he was in his car just doing lines of coke. So I know he wasn't part of that.
But he was at the party, right?
He was at the party. He was their ride there.
And their ride
back. I feel like they were a gang by definition, but from what I see from my other friends who are in actual gangs, they're nothing like an actual gang.
And what's the difference?
They don't do everything they do at such a broad scale like most gangs do. Most gangs are like a family, like in a sense. Like, they weren't like a family. It was more of a group of friends that just got together and beat the shit out of people. I have you guys hiding my identity just because I don't want them coming here and hurting my family. I could really care less what they do to me, but more of my family.
Do you think that's a possibility even now?
I don't think so now that's as much of a possibility, but it still could be. Like, I just want to be careful, you know? I don't want to take that risk that they could come to my house and, you know, do stuff to my family.
Did they retaliate against other families?
Yeah, they retaliated against a few families. I mean, they'd go up to people's houses or go to their parents' work and like send them photos of like their parents' jobs and stuff, or like start cussing out their families, telling them like that they're gonna beat the shit out of their son, they're gonna kill their son, or like stuff like that.
Pretty brazen.
Yeah, really, really heinous things to say to someone.
Threats and intimidation were a big part of this thing?
Threats and intimidation were definitely a big part of the goons and why people were afraid of them, for sure.
So if you'd been jumped, did people go to the cops? Did people go to school officials?
If you got jumped or they did anything, you wouldn't go tell anybody, because that's kind of like a death sentence, I guess. But not really. It's just like they just keep beating you up until they're bored. I definitely, like, these kids definitely had a big intimidation over everybody. Like, everybody not feared them, but they just didn't want to fight them, you know? Because there was definitely groups of kids that were the same size as the goons that could have fought them. And there was one fight where it was like a good 30v30 fight in and out with brass knuckles, knives, like whole 9 yards. But like, it was just people didn't want to have to deal with them. Does that make sense? And so no one really did anything to stop it. And then if they did tell anyone, then they would have to fear for them.
Do you feel like you're betraying the Gilbert Goons talking to us?
No, I don't feel like I'm betraying them because I have no loyalty to them. I mean, at one point I did, but the second they laid hands on me, all loyalty was out the window.
What would you say to the parents of Preston Lord right now?
That I'm sorry that their son had to encounter such bad people, because no one should have to go through that. Like, even like the parents shouldn't have to go through that, and my heart hurts for them.
There's been a lot of people who tell me that if the police had done more, if the schools had done more, if the parents had done more, Preston Lord may still be alive. Does that ring true to you?
If the schools and everyone did more, that this definitely would not have happened. Like, if the parents and the school and these cops punished these kids for these heinous crimes they were committing, then they definitely wouldn't have a kid dead right now because of these kids.